George Whittam is voiceover studio consultant to the stars. He works around Hollywood and all across the country, making people from home sounding as good as possible. And these are high-end talent for television, radio, gaming. George Whittam is coming up to tell us what is important in voiceover studios, coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, delighted to be here. Where is here? I'm not in the usual studio. I have ventured outside of the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Broadcasters Association has been able to put on their broadcasters clinic again. COVID procedures in place. Everybody's wearing masks and not standing too close to each other, except for hugs. We had a few hugs. People glad to see each other after 2 years of not doing so. So I was invited up here to give a couple of talks. Gave a wonderful talk last night, 2 hours of talking about containerized software, getting broadcast audio mixing, intercom and phone systems into Linux computers in a virtualized environment. So that was kind of cool. But enough about that. That's just why I'm not in the usual Telos Alliance studio for this particular show. And what is the show? It's This Week in Radio Tech, our 561st episode. And I'm delighted to go ahead and bring in our guest, a guy who I admire. I like this guy so much I even follow him on Strava. You know, when he can't take a step outside the door without me knowing about it. George Whittam. Hey, welcome, George. Good to see you.
Hey, Kirk. It's so great to be back. Thanks for thinking of me again, man.
Well, it's easy too. I mean, Strava when I go on a little piddly walk, a 3-mile walk, I'm reminded that, George has climbed 1,000 feet on a hike or something like that. What kind of exercise are you doing on Strava? I just like that and like my other friends' stuff.
No, it's mostly mountain biking. It's been my obsession for the last 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, and then I follow others who do 10 times bigger climbs than me, and I feel humbled, and it encourages me to keep going.
Now, are you doing actual mountain biking or Peloton?
No, mountain biking. I did some Peloton for a little while at my last place that I lived. My landlord had one, and I was able to use it, which was awesome. But now I'm living in Venice now. And so I ride the neighborhood, I ride with friends around the city, and I ride up in the mountains, Santa Monica Mountains, around LA. And there's a lot of mountains here. If you haven't been to LA, you think of, you probably don't think of mountains when you think of Los Angeles, but there's a giant mountain range right through the middle of the city. And there's a lot of outdoor activities to do here. So
that's the mountain range that the plane has to clear before it comes into LAX, right?
If you're coming from San Fran. If you're coming from the north, yeah, exactly.
From the north, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I have. A lot of movies are shot in those mountains, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. You know that Hollywood sign? It's up on a mountain.
Yeah,
it's that, and it goes on for miles and miles. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, say we are here to talk about, and we're going to get into the show shortly. George is the kind of guy that builds home studios for the stars, voiceover actors, and there are a lot of them these days. People who are doing voices in games. Gaming is huge. People who are doing broadcasting from home or voice work, voice tracking from home, all these kinds of things. Plus, some live events as well. So George runs a consulting firm. He has a podcast about this. And so we're going to talk to George about what do we know now that maybe we didn't know, or what's been kind of driven home? What have we confirmed since we've had to do so much work from home during COVID? George was actually on this show about 7 or maybe almost 8 years ago, where we talked about home studios. And so George is going to update us and have some specific recommendations on microphones, mic processing, acoustic treatment, things like that, all stuff that you got to know. Our show This Week in Radio Tech, as we get into it, is brought to you in part by my friends at Nautel. And Nautel has restarted, or they're doing their Transmission Talk Tuesdays. But first, let me tell you about the deal they've got going on their GV series of transmitters. So if you're in the market market for a new FM transmitter, especially a higher powered FM transmitter, Nautel has a deal going on only until the end of October where you buy a GV series transmitter and you get a second exciter. That's a backup exciter. If you're in the radio business, you know what that means. It sounds dirty, but it's not. A second exciter for free with your Nautel GV series transmitter. And to get that deal, you just need to contact your friendly Nautel rep or go to Nautel.com, Nautel, Nautel.com, and look for the GV series promotion that's going on. But best talk to your rep. There are reps all over the world. There's 3 or 4 here in the U.S. and in Canada, so check them out, Nautel.com. Now, about Transmission Talk Tuesday. I just signed up for Transmission Talk Tuesday myself, coming up in September on the 14th of September. That's this coming Tuesday. Whether you're located up north or down south, there are things that should be done at your transmitter site on a regular basis to ensure the best performance of your facilities. So tune in to the Transmission Talk Tuesday. It's not really a webinar. It's more of a roundtable. You can come in and chat with the experts and with Jeff Welton. If you like, you're welcome to join in the conversation, ask questions, and give your own advice. Then the following Tuesday, September 21st, they're talking about SDR. That's software-defined radio. SDR technology. Alex Hartman, he's an expert at this, at a lot of things. I just had dinner with Alex last night, actually. Alex Hartman will be on with Jeff Welton discussing the utility and expanding capabilities of software-defined radios. And finally, the last Transmission Talk Tuesday roundtable in September will be September 28th. Lean for Broadcasters. Nautel's head of operations, Brian Irwin, will discuss lean manufacturing and how to identify and apply a value stream associated with your industry workday processes. Well, what does that mean? I'm not sure, but you can find out. You can sign up for all of these just by going to nautel.com/webinars. Nautel.com/webinars. Sign up. They'll send you a little email and a calendar reminder link so you can remind yourself that the Nautel webinar is coming up. That's what I do. I just signed up for the first 2. I was about to click the third one, and it was showtime. So check it out at Nautel.com. Thanks a lot, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, our guest is George Whittam. George, haven't seen you in several years, seriously. So kind of update us on what you're doing and what is consulting business like for you nowadays. I gave a short intro, but give us some details.
I'll turn on my mic. That's Broadcasting 101.
There you go.
The world that I'm in is working 99% with voiceover actors and dealing with their home studios. And this has been my career for the last 13, 14 years. And so this is something that I feel like when COVID came along, I was like uniquely prepared for. It was a right place. It was good to be in this business because I work from home and my clients have to. So we're all like in this thing together. And so I've just been uniquely positioned to help out my niche, which is voiceover actors with their home studios. The reason I think Kirk brought me here was because everybody has to have a decent or really good home studio, and whether they're on broadcast, whether they're doing remotes for a live radio show, a live TV call-in, etc. And so, my job, is starting to step into that world a little bit. I'm going to be helping Van Jones soon with a home setup as well. So, that's another vertical, as they would call it for me. But it's all been about voiceover actors and a little bit of podcasting too. I'm a podcaster and I have my way of doing things and I can show others how to do it. But I'll do all that consulting through GeorgeThe.Tech, my website. And that's where I spend my days. Sometimes driving around LA, most of the time in a Zoom session, explaining how to properly use your mic, how to set up your processing, how to acoustically tune your room and stuff like that.
Normally, when we do the show, I'm in my home studio. I've got a shotgun microphone and some mic processing, basic mic processing, but it sounds really good. Today, I'm on this Audio Technica sports headset because I'm on the road, couldn't bring my whole kit with me. And you're in a studio. You sound absolutely fantastic. I want to tell our audience in a few minutes, we are going to get into some specific hardware, if not recommendations, at least tell you what George is using and maybe what some of his clients are using. We'll keep names secret, but we'll find out, what George likes, and you might like it too. But George, I'm a little bit curious when you get called to help somebody. Let's say a voiceover actor, someone who does gaming voices or voices, more for movies or TV shows, or whatever it may be, or radio voice tracking. What are some of the big typical, like you walk in and you say, oh, I see the problem right away, or okay, there's 3 things here we can take care of today that are going to improve you 90%, and I'm going to come back and finish up improving you the last 10%. What are some of the most egregious errors that you see in home studios that haven't had you come in there?
One of the biggest ones is just bad acoustics, and that comes in different flavors, right? So one of them is just being in a completely normal bedroom, for example, or worse, maybe a living room. So you have a lot of reverberation and a lot of reflection, and we all know what that sounds like, because the last year and a half or so, how many reports have we seen from the very top level A-list celebrity on down from the field, their house, that sounds like garbage because it's so echoey and reverberant, So my job is to try to not make it sound like that. I want to, even if you're at home, I want it to sound like you're in a studio. It's a home. One of my core quips is a home studio can't sound like one. So that's my goal. So the first thing I'll do is look at why does this room sound bad? And if they've already done some things to make it sound good, why is it what they bought not working? One of the most commonly bought products that doesn't help in almost any situation are those mud flap backstop thingamabobs that go behind a studio microphone.
Yeah.
It's like a half circle, and it comes on a mic stand, and you put your mic inside it. That is not an instant voiceover booth, okay? These do not work very well for that cause. They only do maybe 25% of what you actually need. And by the time you've bought one of those things, they can be $100 to $300. You can buy a whole bunch of moving blankets and do a heck of a lot better. Keep in mind, most of this is not on camera. It's VO, it's voiceover, it's just voice. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. You can use regular moving blankets, pad up a room or just a portion of the room. Heck, make a tent, make a fort in the corner of your office or hotel, wherever you are. And you can do a really good job getting rid of reflection. So that's kind of the number one thing. It's getting rid of the sound of the room, so the mic is hopefully mostly hearing the voice without as much of the room as possible.
So I call this
a lot of people, sounding. Yeah,
I call this sounding intimate. You want to have the ability, if that's the sound you're looking for, but you have to start with an intimate sound. You can add reverb, you can add EQ, you can add stuff later on. But if you don't have the intimate sound, it's hard to fix it. If you've got this other stuff. So you want the mouth, the microphone, and you want no other influences to that, if you can, to the extent that you can achieve it, right?
Yeah, that really is the goal. And that's why the mic that Kirk's using right now has a very intimate focused sound, because it's a cardioid mic. It's in very close proximity to his mouth. And that mic is also designed to reject background noise. So it's doing a lot of things. That's why he's in a normal conference room and you don't really even hear it. But the interesting about voiceover is it's not necessarily the sound that Kirk is getting that's not necessarily the sound we want typically for voiceover either, because we still want to try to capture the whole range of the voice, all of the frequencies from treble and sibilants and, the TTs and the tips of the S's all the way down to the chest resonances, right? And you need a studio mic, a good quality studio mic to do that. So we're always fighting with getting good acoustics, having a great quality mic that's very sensitive and hears a lot of stuff, and then dealing with the fact that we have a great quality mic that hears a lot of stuff, and it's going to hear a lot of stuff we don't want it to hear, which is the neighbors, the pets, the kids at home. Boy, when homeschooling was happening, it was even worse, trying to work around your family. So that's what I'm dealing with. And I'm giving a lot of people some sobering advice sometimes. The impression is you can buy some foam, and it's often mislabeled as soundproofing foam. That's a joke. There's no soundproofing foam. and they buy the stuff and they slather a closet or a room with it, and they're going, I still hear all my neighbors. And yeah, so I'm trying to figure out who needs quiet on demand. Are you ready to spend the money it takes to have quiet on demand? And when do you need it? You know, that's where you got to pull out the wallet. You got to pull out the pocketbook, because quiet on demand is expensive. That's soundproofing that will allow you to work through the gardeners, the airport, whatever it is you have interrupting your day. That quiet on demand that's costly. So that's what we deal with. That's what I run into a lot. And that's where people start to get a little overwhelmed at the expense at times.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So you want a room that is reasonably, if not entirely dead, at least you're not getting the sound of kids jumping up and down upstairs or downstairs, or the outdoor air conditioner unit humming away outside, or as in my office, there is the indoor HVAC unit is just across from a wall. Now, I've recorded some audiobooks, and frankly, when I go record the audiobook, I got to turn the air conditioner completely off. I got to have it not super quiet for that. But for doing this show, no, I leave the AC on, and you really don't notice that it's on. But if you're doing a book, yeah, talk to me about the different kinds of voiceover, the different contexts. Some contexts it might be okay for there to be some background noise because you're not going to notice it. But other contexts, you've got to have a super quiet, clean recording. What are some differences in what people do and what's needed acoustically?
Oh man, yeah, the gamut is huge in voiceover. And sometimes people call it the voiceover industry, but really you're doing voiceover for many industries, right? So you've got corporate narration, which is probably the most bread and butter work voice actors will do. It's not the glamorous stuff, doesn't usually require an agent, but it's doing all the training videos and all the in-house announcements and all that stuff that goes into the corporate world. That's a huge part of it. Then you have e-learning. That's an increasingly huge growing sector, which is videos and products for education and doing the voices on that. And there are certain techniques that are required to do that efficiently, because sometimes you have to record thousands of prompts, separate files. So if you're doing it with something like Pro Tools, that could make you insane because it could be really, really slow going. So there are certain tools and workflows. So when I'm helping folks, I'm not just showing them how to talk into the right side of the mic, which happens a lot. These mics are more obvious, but these mics are not always as obvious. I don't know how many times you've seen a mock podcasting setup on TV where the mic is like this.
Yeah.
And we all know this is a side address mic, but it's not obvious to everyone this is a side address mic. This looks like an end address mic, right? So it's all those things that I'm helping people with, but it's distilling all that down and making it not so intimidating and helping them with that workflow that fits the genre or the industry they're working in. So that was a couple. Then then on the other end of the spectrum, the Hollywood side, we have like animation, doing character voices. That was always done in studios, for good reason. The actor wants to just purely act. They want to be directed. Oftentimes they want to have their cast there. I know The Simpsons, I don't know if it is now, but it was always an ensemble cast. Like they were always in one space together.
In one space all together. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's that it is just voice acting, but if you ever get to do some Googling for some videos on YouTube of Simpsons cast, sessions, you'll find some stuff and you'll see how they're playing off each other, eye contact and all that stuff. So that's another side of it. And people are now having to adapt because of COVID to doing that in a home studio, in a vacuum, totally alone. And it is a whole different animal. It is harder to do. And there's more technology that the actor now has to deal with. So that's kind of the other end. Then you got commercials, the things in the world of voiceover, that's the payday. You want to cast the big national ad. You want to be the voice of McDonald's for a few years, that's the best. And that's been done in mixtures of home studios, commercial studios, just depends on the city, the size of the budget, etc. Then you got television stuff for TV, promo, movie trailer stuff, TV affiliate stuff, which is like promo is a subset and affiliates is a subset of that subset. And that's a whole nother niche of voiceover work. I haven't even talked about radio yet, right? And you got radio imaging, and you have radio imaging, and tons of people do voices for radio stations and radio imaging. So as you can see, there are a slew of different markets and industries that you might be doing voiceover for. And I'm trying to understand as many of them as I possibly can, to the degree that I can, and make sure that when somebody's sending that audio out, it's familiar to the listener, whether that's a casting director or the guy that owns the car dealership or the school that's creating the production. Whatever it is, it needs to fit into that genre. And that's what's kept me busy, just being on top of all those different styles.
It's fun explaining to somebody who's not in the industry what we mean by either television imaging or promos, and all I have to do is try to imitate Joe Cipriano and say, "Tonight on The Simpsons," and oh yeah,
That's
okay, I
right.
know what you're talking about. Or Channel 5 presents a special investigative report. And as far as the sweeps
Exactly.
promos, right? They're in sweeps. Hey,
Yep.
you're watching This Week in Radio Tech. George Whittam is our guest. He is a voiceover consultant and booth producer and to the stars. People that you may not know are stars, but voices that you've heard before. And he does some consulting and podcasts on This Week in Radio Tech. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Broadcast Bionics, and the Camera One product. And we'll be right back with some specific recommendations from George, and here's some cool stories too. It's all coming up next on TWiRT.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics. Designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need one camera for a studio wide shot and usually one camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Check out the Camera One system at Broadcast Bionics. You can go to bionic.radio. Bionic.radio is the website, or just Google them, look them up on your favorite search engine, Broadcast Bionics. They have lots of products for helping you make better content, for better social media integration, and driving people to your website or to your broadcast. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, and thank you for supporting them or checking them out if that's something that you think you could use. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack, not in the Telos Alliance studio this week. I'm on the road in Madison, Wisconsin at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Broadcasters Clinic. That's a big title, and we get to say the word broadcasters twice. That's 6 syllables worth of, in addition to the rest of it. Hey, our guest is George Whittam. George is a studio voiceover consultant to the stars. George, welcome back in. And we've learned a little bit about the different acoustic spaces and, how to quiet them down. You mentioned moving blankets. You mean like the blankets you can rent at U-Haul? You could rent them but just not return them? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and it's funny, and I've worked in Hollywood off and on since 2004. When I first moved here, I learned that everything in Hollywood in film production has its own name, right? So we would
Oh,
call them moving blankets. In Hollywood, they're called Fernie pads. So Fernie pads are what
okay.
they always have on set, the production mixer, which I did a little while, a couple of years of production mixing. You always have some of those on hand. So when you're in a super reverberant space, you can try to clean up the echo by draping them around off camera, tossing them on the floor, etc. Well, they're so commonly available, so inexpensive, and they do such a good job of absorbing echo that, well, they're so damn good that I actually co-produced and co-invented a product based on them. So imagine a booth that isn't a suitcase that you can check as baggage, like a normal suitcase. And when you get there, you unfold it and you pop it out of the suitcase, and behind you, voila, you have in 5 minutes a studio booth. So my buddy Rick Wasserman and I invented this thing called TriBooth, TRI booth.com. At the end of the day, it's a tent made out of furniture blankets or moving blankets.
Huh.
We've gotten better and better quality blankets over the years, more dense, heavier weight, better at absorbing echo and things like that. But they're very effective, and dollar for dollar, pound for pound, I will choose them over foam in almost every case, because one really good super heavy duty blanket might be up to $50 for a really heavy duty one, and but that's 8 by 9 feet oftentimes, or 7 by 8. That's covering a lot of space, and you can get a lot of effectiveness out of one or two to three of those blankets. Will create a very dead acoustical space and get rid of a tremendous amount of echo. The only place they really stink in is in a closet.
Yeah.
Like when you're in a little tiny
Oh,
closet box. The
uh-huh.
problem with those really small spaces is you're not only dealing with reverb anymore, now you're dealing with resonance. So it's like
Oh,
when you blow across
yeah.
a Coke bottle and it goes woo,
Yeah.
and it rings at a frequency. That's what these little spaces do. These little closets, even all these off-the-shelf prefab studio booths that you can buy, they're these resonating chambers. And when you just try to filter it out with some foam or some blankets, it doesn't do the job. And you have to use what are called bass traps. And you
Yeah.
have to really control those lower frequencies.
Suncast, I've popped the URL for TriBooth in there. If you can pop that web page up while we're just chatting about it. And so, George, acoustic foam, I've found that it's okay to dampen super high frequencies, but it doesn't do so well on mid range, and it doesn't do so well, of course, with bass at all. Bass just flows right through it. But a heavy blanket, like you're talking about, can in fact deaden. I've seen voiceover artists do their work at a hotel, and they have even just gotten the ironing board out of the closet, right? And then draped the hotel blankets over the ironing board and put their mic under the ironing board, like on top of the desk, right? They put the ironing board on top of the desk. But
Dude,
yeah,
I'll tell you, I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. I've seen some really great improv booths, but the reason that this thing exists is because my buddy Rick, who's been a client of mine and now a friend for 15, 16 years, was tired of doing that. And he just wanted to have this consistent, easy to use thing that he could have everywhere. And when you look at it in the picture, you go, I could make that. Yeah, a lot of you probably could. If you're technical and you have a garage and you've got spare time, you could make one. But this is for all the folks out there who don't want to get their hands dirty, don't have time, don't have space, and just want to have a solution. And that's what it is. It gives you all the little accessories: a mic mount, a copy stand, lighting, power strip, all that crap you have to.
All the things that an ironing board doesn't have. The ironing board doesn't have a power strip or a mic mount or anything like that, or lighting. So that's cool. Hey, I got a quick question about the Fernie pads. If you go to the store, if you go to Amazon or Walmart or whatever, and you buy a quilt, these days they're pretty lightweight. But I tell you what, great grandma had some quilts that were so heavy you'd almost suffocate under them. Can you use a quilt if you need to?
Yeah, I mean just a thin, dense quilt isn't going to be as effective, but if it's got a little bit of fill in it, a little polyfill, or actually duvets. a duvet cover, or not the cover really, but the actual duvet, those comforters that are really thick and warm. Those things are amazingly effective. Really, really effective. You can throw in your bag a few of those squeeze A clamps, for clamping things. It's like a giant clothespin, and grab some comforters from the hotel or from the bed and clamp those to furniture and create a space. I mean, you believe it's just amazing the creativity people have. I went to a conference 5 or 6 years ago called VO Atlanta, and my buddy Dan and I were the keynote speakers, and we had this whole thing we called "Show Us Your Booths," and people were sharing pictures of their fabric, their hilarious sometimes creations in their hotel rooms, because voice actors at a conference, they're still auditioning, and they're usually still some of them are still working throughout the conference.
That TV station wants their promos done that night. So,
yeah, absolutely. The heavier and thicker, the weightier, the better it's going to work. The foam isn't all bad, but most of what's provided or bought by most folks, because of its cost effectiveness, is only about 1 inch thick to 2 inches thick. And it can't, like as Kirk said, it can't do anything below about 1,000 hertz. And a lot of the energy in your voice is under 1,000. It's between like 100 and 1,000. So until you start really doubling and even tripling up layers and layers of foam, it doesn't really start doing the job. You need a lot more than you might think to really counteract it. And again, that's in small enclosed spaces because they resonate. The sound gets trapped and you get these resonant frequencies that really you have to get rid of.
We're going to get into some specific recommendations in a minute, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that if you're in a room that has a hardwood floor or a vinyl flooring, you need to put a rug over that. That you're going to take care of a whole lot of bounce if you get a rug, especially a heavy rug, or carpeting, obviously. And then at my own desk, George, where I used to do the show, I've even popped the camera up to show it. Right over my desk, I've got a couple of acoustic panels there. They're about 3 inches thick foam, and they at least knock down my own voice just bouncing up there and bouncing right back. So
don't ignore the ceiling. One of my favorite things actually is I've done a few studios where we've put the majority of the treatment in the ceiling. We've put like quite thick acoustical material up there with a fabric cover to make it look nice. We've even put lighting in there, so you have light cans that it looks like a can lighting, but it's inside the paneling. We call it like an acoustic cloud, and those are awesome because they're really effective. I mean, they do a great job, and then all you have to do is sort of eliminate a few key spots of reflection. One of my longtime beloved clients, you mentioned Joe Cipriano, a client of mine, I've known him for years. Another guy named Scott Rummel. We've done a few studios for him where the ceiling is where all the treatment is, and we just put 2 panels on the wall. When I say panel, why don't I grab one? There's one right over here. Sure. Let's see if I can grab it without creating a disaster. And I just knocked my curtain down off the window so you can see.
Oh no! Yeah.
Anyway,
sure enough.
This is for education, folks. I don't care. This is an acoustical panel. This is a good one. This one is buddy of mine made these, but it's full of rock wool, mineral wool insulation. Oh, this stuff is awesome, absorbing echo, like amazing. And you can even hear, like if I have it out here, and then if I bring this up in here, can you hear the reverb of the rooms just suck away?
Big difference, yeah.
Really effective, right? So these are what I'll use in most studios where we have a little space and budget to install a few of these things, because they are way better than just foam. At controlling reverb, and they look a lot better, and these will last for years and years, and you can transport them, you can move them around, you can take them to the next house. So these are my preferred way of dealing with acoustics when we want something a little nicer than blankets.
Where do you get rock wool at?
Well, it used to be kind of hard to get, especially in California. Everything's illegal here. That's fun, but except for one thing, but you have to from Nevada, it used to be hard to get, but now you can go to Lowe's and Home Depot, and it's sold as rock wool safe and sound. So you look for safe and sound or AFB. And that's like a 3-inch thick layer of this stuff that is now being sold for insulating homes. It's going to be specified in much more expensive homes because it's more expensive per square foot than the usual pink stuff. But it's also better environmentally. The way it's made, it doesn't have VOCs from formaldehyde. So it's a lot better in your environment. And I won't harp on it, but if you're going to build a studio and have a bunch of materials in there, and keep in mind, you're going to be inside this enclosed space, sometimes airtight space for hours at a time, make sure it's made with products that aren't going to kill you. Stuff that doesn't have a lot of chemicals. It's no joke. Try to reduce. It's not easy to do. And most of the products that you buy off the shelf and the studio boxes that you buy, the Whisper Rooms and everything else, they're made with particle board, and particle board has this stuff in it. So take a lot of breaks, get fresh air. Don't be trapped inside your little box for more than an hour or two. Get some fresh air because these things all have chemicals in them.
I want to put that acoustic panel that you brought out had it looks like a white fabric. Does the type of fabric make a difference? And I asked because at my radio stations in Hawaii and in American Samoa, we've made our own acoustic panels. I don't think we got to use rock wool. That would be great to do them with that. But we got beautiful island prints, because they're
nice.
Hawaii and American Samoa. So very tropical prints. They really liven up the room visually, and they deaden the room acoustically. Exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah. This you want fabric that is think of like speaker grill cloth. Remember when back in the days when speakers had speaker grill cloth, you want the sound to pass through, but not the not light. So like you want the fabric to be dense enough that you don't see the material behind it, but not a tight weave like canvas. Canvas would be bad because it's very tight, almost airtight.
Right.
And that reflects a lot of sound back. So stuff that has the most commonly accessible and available is burlap. Burlap coffee bags. Burlap, any kind of burlap. It's also called jute. You can get this stuff in big rolls in different colors, and a lot of the most basic affordable panels that I'll get made or order will be wrapped in that stuff, and it works great.
So we've spent so far almost the whole show talking about materials and acoustics, and I promise
because it's so important.
It is.
This is the stuff that nobody talks about. I mean, it's not sexy. It's not as cool as a microphone, but dude, this is the thing that's going to make your studio sound pro. More than any of the gear is how you tune it acoustically. So that's why when I do my own presentations, I harp on this for a while. Yeah.
If you get the acoustics really good, then the tweaking you do have to do with microphones and adjusting the audio processing or the post-production, instead of spending all your time getting rid of problems, you can spend this much time getting rid of a problem, and then the rest of the time on how does it actually sound. You can deal with the appropriate amount of compression and EQ and things like that to make the voice pop like it's supposed to, or maybe your producer does that, but you don't have to spend all your time and effort getting rid of the things that are problematic anyway. George, we got to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about electronics. We are going to talk about people ask me, well, I was told I should get a condenser mic because it'll pick up everything. And as you said earlier, and the other problem is it picks up everything. Yet I know the mic you're using right there, I think, is a condenser mic. It's a shotgun condenser mic, I use a shotgun condenser mic. So we're going to want to understand the difference between a condenser mic like a TLM mic that you had earlier, or actually had a Audio-Technica mic. The difference between that and a shotgun mic. When is a shotgun mic maybe not appropriate? I see Joe Sip using one. You're using one. I use one. When is it not appropriate? We'll get to that all coming up as This Week in Radio Tech rolls on. Our show is brought to you in part by Hank Landsberg at Henry Engineering, and I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite products at Henry Engineering, and that would be the Superlight. The Superlight is the modern day super relay. Now, if you're a broadcast engineer, you have spent time and effort and a little bit of money installing Henry Engineering super relays. That's the thing that takes your contact closure from your audio console, or maybe your collector to ground, as it's often called, and turning that into 110 volt relay to light up your on-air light, both in the studio, let everybody in the studio know, hey, we're live, and outside the studio, letting people in the hallway know, shh, hold it down, don't open the door, we're live on the air. Well, that was the Henry Super Relay, and I've probably installed a dozen of those over the years. Well, the new version of that is the Henry Super Light, and the Super Light gets its name because these days we're turning LED lights on and off typically. You buy studio lights for the hallway, they're typically LED fixtures. And you have also the LED fixtures maybe attached to your microphone itself. If you're using a Mica mic arm, you're going to have a light right there. Well, the Henry Super Light can run those directly up to half an amp of current at 12 volts to turn those lights on. And if you want to supply external power, you can sync up to an amp of voltage, an amp of current at 12 volts to turn lights on. It also gives you some extra relays to do things like, well, if you're using a console that doesn't mute your speakers, well, the Henry Super Light will mute those speakers for you if you're passing through the relay there. You can also mute things like a phone ringer. And if you're still using a cassette deck to scope your show, well, yes, you could actually run this capstan motor through the relay as well. Also importantly, you can wire these things up with RJ45 connectors, with Cat5 cable and RJ45s, and you can set a little address inside with a little header pin. Point is, you can easily wire several of them together and giving them each their own address. So maybe your station wiring for all the studios is in one location, and you can easily wire them up, put them in a rack, screw them to the wall, and have them all in a convenient place where you bring your lighting wiring there. Now, that's not all that Henry Engineering has to offer you. Henry Engineering, makes boxes that solve problems, things like the Matchbox HD, the USB Matchbox, to give you a fantastically high quality USB to audio conversion on XLR connectors. So it's really professional, not RCA connectors, but balanced audio on XLRs. They have things like the Twin Match, the Mic Alert, the Talent Pod, the Sports Pod, the Micro Mixer. There's a whole range of problem solvers from Henry Engineering. I want to also mention that Henry Sportscaster. This is a one rack unit mixer that is almost a complete sports production facility. It's got mixers in there for your different talent to talk and for a field microphone, also for a remote, like say a field reporter. You can bring a field reporter's microphone in, but it also has a built-in monitoring section and a little IFB intercom section, all built into the Henry Sportscaster. You want to check out the Henry gear, go to henryeng.com. henryeng.com is the website where you can see Superlight and all the other products at henryeng.com. You also, where do you want to buy the Henry products from? I'll tell you where. From my friends at Broadcasters General Store. Their website is bgs.cc. I just saw Dave Kirsten today up here in Madison, Wisconsin. He goes around the country and takes care of Broadcast General Store customers. They really have a hands-on approach to helping you, the broadcast engineer, with your ordering of products. They have easy payment and credit cards and things like that. They have a whole system built up to help you know when your broadcast equipment will be delivered, what's on back order, what has a short order delay, what's available right off the shelf, what can come overnight if you need something overnight. bgs.cc, or you give them a call at 352-622-7700. Look at that. I'm looking right at the camera right now and telling you the phone number because I've got that memorized. I've had that number memorized literally for 30 years now. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. They got sharp pencils, lots in stock, and they can tell you when things are going to be there. Good folks there at bgs.cc. Thanks a lot, Dave Kirsten, Carrie Kirsten, and the whole crew, Jessica Shute, Candy, Hugh, everybody there. Buck Waters at Broadcasters General Store. All right, let's move along. We're talking to George Whittam. He is over consultant to the stars. And George, I guess we ought to talk about some electronics here. And you've got some examples. You want to start with the microphone, and how do you decide what mic to use? Or have you walked in someplace and say, that's just not the right mic for you, or not the right mic for this space? Talk to me about microphones, if you would.
Totally. I mean, that's the one thing the first thing everybody as a voice actor is going to obsess over is what microphone they're going to buy. I want to say real quick too about Henry. Until I discovered that there were all these cool products just for radio engineering, I used to try to solve problems for voiceover studios, like how do you turn an on-air light on, or how do you turn off speakers when the mic is on? and I'd have my dad make these things because I didn't know there was these companies making this stuff, you know. And then I found companies like Henry, and I was like, oh my God, this stuff exists. That Superlay is really cool. I actually have a few clients who we have like a rudimentary broadcast board, and when they turn on the mic, it turns on an on-air light above their door, so the family knows to be quiet. So that's actually really awesome. I think a lot of voice actors would love that. So from the microphones perspective, like there are microphones that have heavily established themselves as industry standard in voiceover. I mean, there's the Sennheiser MKH416 shotgun mic, for example. This thing is pervasive in voiceover studios, especially in LA and Hollywood. There's a lot of theories to that. There's some reasons for that, but it is highly, highly popular. And there's a reason shotgun mics are really practical for home studios, because it's like a telephoto lens on a camera. It focuses in on the voice and tries its best at rejecting the stuff you don't want. And while it may seem silly to take a microphone designed to be on a boom pole and suspend it above the actor's head out of frame about 4 feet in the air to be used in this manner, but it works. It does a great job of rejecting echo and background noise. It does have that intimate sound without having to really eat it. You know, I'm about a fist to a hand span away. That's kind of my play space. But you do have some play space, you know, whereas when you're doing radio broadcast, again, this is not a broadcast mic, but it's going to stand in as one. You know, people are often going to be like right up on it. And you don't need to do that with a shotgun mic. You have some room to breathe, and that allows for a little more natural sound. It also allows you to physically move around a little bit. Now, that's why I like shotgun mics. I think they're very practical. I'm in a non-soundproof space. Let's be very honest. I'm in an apartment in Venice. Santa Monica Airport is right here. Small aircraft, Gardner noise, you name it, it's here. I'm not going to opt for a large diaphragm condenser mic like this, or a Neumann TLM 103, which are very popular. That's not going to be my first mic of choice, because those things pick up everything. They pick up background noise really well, because their pickup is a wide range, a wide area. And so they do sound amazing, and they are going to be the studio mic of choice in a lot of the pro studios, but that's because their noise floors are really low, like minus 70 dB on the dB scale when you hit record. You know, that's what you expect out of a really good studio. That's not what you're getting at home. So we want tools that give you an advantage. So I mentioned the Sennheiser mic because it's the 800-pound gorilla. If it's a little rich for your blood, I'm on a Rode NTG5 right here. I also have a Rode NTG4 right here. I like this one because it's got a high-pass filter in it. So it has a built-in low-end filter. A lot of us are plugging these things into non-broadcast gear. We don't have filtering. We just have a preamp. So to be able to preemptively take out that rumble right on the mic is pretty sweet. It also has a high boost, which isn't good for everybody, but it does give you that little bit of sizzle, that little crispness that it might otherwise lack for some people. So that's a kind of a cool mic. These are not that expensive, like under $400. And the NTG4 Plus has a battery in it, so it'll plug into anything. It's self-powered, so you don't have to worry about phantom power and stuff.
So I have a question
then
about.
It's like, go for it.
I have a question about shotgun mics. Now, I totally agree that the large diaphragm condenser mics, low noise floor if they're designed well, and certainly the more expensive ones are really well designed.
Totally.
Of course, you've got to have an acoustic space with also a low noise floor. Otherwise, you're wasting your money on the microphone. But they can sound absolutely amazing. A shotgun mic, I've noticed that I have the Sennheiser MKH416. It rejects off-axis sound super well. It's just really quiet off to the sides. But I've never been able to figure this out myself, so I'll ask you, what kind of coloration of the voice, the on-axis voice, is there some coloration involved? Because there's kind of got to be with the way its pattern is. There's got to be, if you get off a little bit, things start sounding a little bit different. But if you're right down the center, does it sound really natural or just affected in a nice way?
I think that's the key. It's affected in a nice way.
Okay.
It
All
isn't
right.
flat. It isn't natural. This is the thing about studio mics. Some microphones' job is to pick up what's there and without color, right? But the vast majority of the mics that we use are really not used in that way. They are placed in a certain way to get the best balance of the way that source sounds with the environment that it's in and the aesthetics that the producer wants to achieve, right? All that fancy for saying you can use many different mics in many different situations, but if you don't put it in the right place, it doesn't matter, right? The placement is critical. But these mics do color. This one does a really good job off axis. If I start talking to the side of the mic, it just starts to roll off the top end and it starts to get very, very, very muffled.
Yeah.
The 416, when you go off axis, the off axis response is kind of like a sawtooth and it has all these weird resonances. Yeah. So you don't want to get too far off to the side on most shotgun mics. It's not flattering. Whereas a large diaphragm condenser mic, that is where it shines. So these mics, you can work around the mic quite a lot. You can physically move around the mic and get more consistent sound. So I would say this is a more actor-friendly mic. It's like in an animation studio, you're going to oftentimes see one of these probably up about a foot away or so, and the actor can wave their arms and be a maniac, and it sounds great. But that is not what the situation is in a home studio. You can't afford to be that far away from the mic. It picks up too much resonance in the room, too much echo. So a shotgun mic does a better job of that. But yeah, that's the side effect of it. Off axis, it gets weird. So you want to stay in its sweet spot. You know, it's like the size of like a softball. That's the sweet spot.
Are there times when a dynamic mic is appropriate? And I ask because there's one dynamic mic that I personally like a lot. It makes me sound good, and that's the Heil PR40. It looks a lot like the Audio Technica in terms of the body that you have, but you do end address it because it's a dynamic mic. I like it, but
side by side with the labels covered, I think people would be hard pressed to understand which is which. They are similar. So dynamic mics. Yeah, I know Bob Heil. I've met him, chatted with him. He's an awesome guy, and I know the mics well too. The dynamic mics, their job is more about picking up the voice in close proximity, mostly, and that's just because most of them are relatively low sensitivity. They need a lot of gain to get a decent output. And they do their job best when in close proximity. Yes, you could still use the Heil PR40 at a distance, and it would sound relatively good, but it would definitely start sounding thinner. It would lose a lot of the low end of the voice, and you would need tremendous amounts of gain. Like you'd need most Scarlett 2i2s and all those portable preamp interfaces that most of us use. They just couldn't cut it with most dynamic mics. The output isn't high enough. So that's why I'm generally not recommending it. To get that sort of sound, and I think the 416 has sort of established itself as the sound of a voiceover on a mic. It's just because it's been around for so long, since the 70s. It's been used in voiceover, and so it's a footprint. It's like a sound that's just established. And everything else is sort of an approximation of what that sounds like. And it ain't flat. It's got treble. It's got a treble boost on it. You know, it's got some sizzle. It's got a little bit of a low end, mid-range build up to give you that warmth. And then at the end, at the bottom, it rolls off. So it doesn't pick up all that low end junk.
So you mentioned preamps, and we're going to talk about those and what's important, what's not. But the low output, relatively low output of some dynamic mics, and especially a ribbon mic. Oh my goodness, really low output. Some people, advocate using something like a cloud lifter. Is that something you advocate? Is there benefit there?
I've heard a lot of setups with the Rode, with the Shure SM7B. Thanks to like Joe Rogan and other podcasters, it's become like a household name almost, this microphone. notoriously low output microphone. And so the Cloud Lifter 5-6 years ago, Roger Cloud, love the guy, met him too. He's a cool dude. Boy, the Cloud Lifters bought him a couple of boats, I think. The Cloud Lifter is a tool that boosts the gain theoretically without any added noise, about 25 dB or so of gain. So those do help. But sometimes they magnify other issues. I've heard them sometimes add noise or bring up a noise or a buzz that was not obvious before. Right. And it's not really the fault of the Cloud Lifter. It's just there's a noise already in there that you don't notice until you boost the gain. And then it's like, oh, there's a buzz in there. I didn't realize that was there. Because those dynamic mics, it's just a simple moving coil. And if there's any source of noise, RFI or magnetic interference near the microphone, it becomes an antenna and it picks up a buzz. So it's a mixed blessing. And I find that by the time you buy a Cloud Lifter, an SM7 or something, so you're in it for $600+. This is a $500 mic right here. And it does everything you really need right out of the box. It's just so much easier to get the right sound with the right mic.
So mic pre's, and a lot of times we buy a mic pre that is a USB connection in one, but I've seen mic pre's anywhere from literally $30 or $40. There's a whole lot of them on the market that are in the $100 to $200 range, some a little higher, and then there's the $2,000 mic pre's and higher. What do you think that a person should be aiming for? Let's assume you have a condenser mic. So you've got decent gain there anyway. What are you looking for in a mic preamp, or what should people just absolutely avoid?
There's not too much out there to avoid anymore, because I think almost all of the companies have figured out the circuit design, the chip design, the AD converter circuits. I don't dabble below $100. Okay, that's kind of a barrier to me. I think there might be a few. Behringer sometimes will shock you with something really cheap that works, but consistently tends to be above $100 threshold is where these USB interfaces tend to really be really good quality. Some of the big ones that we just use all the time that are pervasive are the Focusrite Scarlett series, Steinberg the UR series. The PreSonus is kind of hit or miss sometimes, but they have their USB interface series that works. Some of them are really good. They have a new one that I'm very curious to test out that has built-in channel strip. So imagine just a basic looking, like this one right here. Imagine that, but with a channel strip in it that you control through a console for $200. I think it's called the Revelator or something like that. That one I'm very curious to test out in my own studio and try. Then, so once you get past those basic features, which is a mic preamp, a headphone jack, a way to change your gain, a way to set your headphones, and on the really good ones, a way to blend the monitoring from the remote side and your end. Blend is now you're adding features. Blend is so helpful to have.
This Focusrite I'm using right here doesn't really have a control over the blend. It's the remote the USB is on or off. Now the one that I usually use in the studio, which is an M Audio, there is a blend, and many of them do have a blend control, but it's one more potentiometer to add to the price of the box, and I wanted this smaller box. But like right now, I'm not hearing myself as loud as I like to, because if I turn myself up, then you're really loud, and I have no control over that with this particular Focusrite.
Here's my secret weapon. This is what you
What is that?
Keep one of these in the bag with that headset. This is a MICPORT Pro 2, and this is it's a Scarlett or any one of those USB preamps we're talking about, but condensed down to the smallest physical, practical size. It's got your XLR combo jack on one end, your headset jack on the other end, micro USB, and also a micro USB charging port. So it has a built-in lithium battery. So this is another self-powered device. So that means it'll work with any device, iOS devices, things that can't provide any power. This can provide power. So it'll work with literally everything. And it has that all-important blend knob in the middle right there. That's the blend knob. This is more me and more them, right? That's so helpful when you're doing live sessions. And a lot of voiceover work is like radio. It's live. It's not live to the air, but it's live to the studio. And they're listening to you real time. They're sending you audio back. You're hearing playback of tracks that you have to read over, or you're hearing the engineers talk back. To be able to turn one knob and just kind of get more me and less them is really helpful. A few other little bells and whistles this has. It's hidden inside that very few gear pieces have. It has a high pass filter. We already talked about why that's helpful. And it has a limiter, just an on-off switch. But that's huge because as a voice actor, you don't have to worry about smashing into the red and clipping, something you're doing, like you're doing a character or something, and you forgot to back the gain down. The limiter will catch you and protect you, and that's built in. I think that's pretty awesome. That's a really cool thing.
You know what? We actually interviewed Michael Goodman, the head of that company and maybe inventor of that product.
Dude's a
actually
genius.
about 100 episodes ago. So about a little over 2 years ago, we interviewed Michael Goodman about that.
He's a genius. I'll tell you, he's making some cool stuff. Then, I mean, so this is like a sweet spot. It's not cheap. It's around 300-ish, right?
Right.
But it's really good quality circuit. Like the preamp is pristine, good headphone amp. Everything in here, while it's small, sounds really good. And that's what I like about it. Then as you go up from there, now you're just adding features, right? And the king that I love to hate is this guy right here.
Yeah.
The Apollo Twin, or Apollo from Universal Audio.
Mm-hmm.
I say I love to hate it. I've been installing these just for you radio guys' audience. The first client I installed one of these for is the voice of Jack. You know, the voice of Jack FM, Howard Kogan. Yeah. That's the first guy I installed one of these for, 2011. It's still being used in his studio, the original unit. They are made well. Now, what these things do is they not only do they have the preamp, the headphone mixer, all of the routing and all that stuff, but they have DSP, which let you emulate all kinds of gear. Preamps, compressors and limiters, channel strips, Neve, SSL, API, on and on and on. This is all gear that we all audio geeks in the recording world, covet. It can all do it inside the box, right? Uh-huh. And these have become popular for that reason, because clients where I had like a discrete preamp and maybe another thing that was like a compressor with a lot of outboard gear to manage and adjust gain staging and all that stuff, it's now all baked into a little box. That's cool. But for me, what's really cool is I can help set up that setting virtually. So I will connect with them from across the internet, remote access their controls on their screen, listen to them read script, and fine tune all of the settings and the multi-band EQs and everything else to my heart's content, and make a preset. And that is the game changer that this Apollo has afforded my clients, my business. Is it good for everybody? I don't think so. I think a lot of people are more suited to something like this. Very simple. Every knob is visible. This is a one knob does 10 things box. Not always the best choice for everyone. It's good. You can get lost quickly, but it's an amazing piece of tech.
And we're going to have to hit the break here real quick. But George, once audio is in the USB digital domain and gone into your Mac, your PC, whatever you have, I'm not going to say there's nothing you can do wrong to it. There's a million ways to still screw it up. But at that point, we are in the digital domain. And at that point, generally speaking, things are pretty well set, and you're not going to cause little nuanced problems with the audio at that point, right?
Yeah, as long as you record at least, to me now the standard is 24-bit recording. I think you should record everything at 24-bit. That's what all these things convert AD to anyway. You're good, because in 24-bit recording, if you're recording in 44.1 kilohertz or better, you're capturing the range of the human voice and pretty much all instruments and everything with a lot of detail, and And with 24-bit audio, you also can be a little bit less mindful of gain. You can record with lower input levels as an actor and not be worried about, oh, I got to get that modulation. I got to be in that -6 to -3 VU. No, you really don't with 24-bit.
Yeah.
You can have a lot more headroom, and that makes your job way easier when you're trying to do a script, not having an eye on a VU meter. That's hard to do. It's radio people do that, but actors, that's a different deal.
In the analog domain, we do have to worry about keeping the noise floor down with room acoustics and having a good pre-quality. But once you're in the 24-bit digital domain, if you end up, okay, so I didn't use the top 16 bits. I didn't record at -3. I recorded at -12 or -15. It's okay.
Yeah.
Your digital noise floor is still way, 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 way down there, and you can do a lot to the audio, and you're not going to bring the noise up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, we got to take
of all the things. Yeah, go for it.
Now, we got to take a quick break, and we're going to need your tip of the week when we come right back. George Whittam is our guest. He is a voiceover studio consultant to the stars, and I just love hearing George's advice. I like it a lot because George's advice, comports with my own experience, and he's just got a better, more esoteric way of saying it, and then he also has some experience with a few pieces of equipment that I don't have. So I really like hearing George's advice. So far, he doesn't say anything that I go, no, that's not right at all. I'm glad we're in agreement here on the stuff, because obviously we've had some similar experiences. Our show This Week in Radio Tech, episode 561, is brought to you in part by my friends at Angry Audio. AngryAudio.com is the website. And Angry Audio makes a number of things that you could find very useful around your broadcast facility. This is one of them. This is a headphone amp. It's the headphone gizmo. Right over here, and this can go underneath your countertop, right, in your radio station, in your studio. You can hide it under there. It's got 4 screw holes here, and it's got the little rubber bumpers right there, which means you can run the screws right up in the bottom of the wood countertop, and the thing's not going to sit there and cackle, make noise or be a little off center. It's going to be nice and tight up against there. And on the back here that you're looking at, it's got the power input over here. And then it's got audio inputs on RJ45 connectors, the Studio Hub standard, and you can daisy chain power and audio from one unit to another to another. The headphone amp in here is plenty loud. It's got both kinds of headphone connectors, 1/4 inch and the 1/8 inch tip ring sleeve connector right there. Plenty of volume available on the volume control here. And what I like about it, George, this design right here, you won't snag your pantyhose on this nice curved design underneath the countertop. Now, if you don't want to put it under the counter, you can lay it on top of the counter like this. It'll sit right on these little rubber feet. It won't move around, and you can have it right on top if that's what you'd prefer. This is the headphone gizmo from Angry Audio at angryaudio.com. And remember, Angry Audio is where you can get your Studio Hub adapters to do your Studio Hub wiring. This makes wiring your studio so much easier, especially if you're interfacing to audio over IP systems like Axia's Livewire or WheatNet or anything Ravenna or some Dante gear, anything that's got an RJ45 connector for the analog or the AES EBU input or output. You can bring that right out to your XLR connectors, hook that right in the back of your equipment. And there's a whole line of Studio Hub gear, wiring accessories available. Look at that right there as part of the catalog. You can get that at angryaudio.com. You can see all your favorite Studio Hub gear and all the different iterations of it. Check it out at angryaudio.com. If you order from a broadcast dealer, you need to insist, seriously, on Angry Audio and not a third-party knockoff, and get the real Studio Hub stuff that's still made in the same Studio Hub factory as it always has been. Also, our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by my friends over at Max Connect Wireless. Here's Gary Morrill to tell you more.
I'm Gary Morrill, Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about Max Connect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using Max Connect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. Max Connect. Check it out.
And I've got mine too. See, Gary, got my Max Connect right here. This is the one from PepWave, and they also have ones from Cradlepoint as well. It's prioritized data over 4G LTE networks and with a fixed IP address. What broadcast engineers need to get the broadcast on the air wirelessly. Check out Max Connect Wireless from the Max Connect group at Max. I know it's spelled funny, 2 X's, 1 K, to maxconnect.com. We will have the link in the show notes. So thanks a lot, Josh Bone, sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we have just about 3 minutes left, and we have to go. So, George Whittam, you are on the hot seat now for a tip of the week. What are we waiting for?
Well, I'm not going to pander in too much, but you do have the coolest sponsors, I have to admit, because every time there's a commercial, I'm like, there's some really cool stuff in there.
I know.
Really,
I know.
that
I'm
Max,
so lucky.
that Max Connect, I have a lot of clients who've been trying to do the hashtag van life thing, and they need really good LTE from campgrounds and stuff. They need something like that. That is legit right there. My tip of the week is really all about knowing when it's time to process your audio.
Ooh.
And I'm bringing this up because there's a Facebook group I'm in called VO Tech Talk. Actually, it's VO Pros, Voiceover Pros. And it was this long post by a good old friend in the voiceover and TV business, Dave Cavassier. And, he's like, I'm getting notes from my agents saying we're over processing. I want to hear it flat. And the thing is like, there's no blanket rule about anything. Remember at the beginning, I was talking about there's tons of different industries that we're voiceover acting for. The royal we, not the royal we, I don't voice act, but there's a lot of you out there doing this that you're providing audio for. The key thing is to know who you're working for and what they want. And if it's auditioning, make sure you know what they expect to hear from you in that audition. Do they want to hear the honest representation of your studio? Ruler flat, no compression, don't try to hide anything because they want to know. Then you got to give them what they want. You need to be really careful if you're going to send completely unprocessed audio, which I've set up presets to do that. Yes, presets to make unprocessed audio. You better know what you're doing because engineers know when you're processing, right? But on the other end of the scale, a lot of the voiceover work you're going to do, you're going to be auditioning for the end user that knows nothing about production, nothing at all about how the sound that they hear on TV or on the radio or on YouTube is produced. And so if you send in that totally dry, flat audition and they hear you next to somebody else who's already sweetened it up, you're probably not going to win that gig. So the bottom line is know who your audience is when you're doing an audition and make sure you're giving them what it is they're looking for. That is so incredibly important. And it's going to be the difference between winning a big gig and missing out. And the bigger the gigs, the more picky they're going to be about hearing what they want to hear and getting the sound quality they expect. That's going to be the difference between squeaking by in VO and really making a living in VO.
That you bring up a good point for engineers and consultants like yourself to help your clients, the talent clients, give them some easy options to process or not to process, or to process very, very lightly.
Yes.
Just so, give them that, and so they don't have to fiddle with knobs and all that. Say, hey, you might have some jobs where you need fairly unprocessed. This is going to just saw the top off a little bit and get rid of the noise floor. But if you need to be processed for that loud sound, then this will do it for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Communicate with the talent, and talent communicate with just communicate. Know what everybody needs and wants, and it will make everybody's job. Your job as an actor or anybody providing audio for radio or remotes or anything is to help provide your talent and then help the production have an easy job of dealing with, the rest of what they have to do. You're just you're a cog in a giant machine.
Yeah.
You want to be quiet and smooth and just reliable, consistent, clean and reliable, that they can count on you. And that's really the big job. Once you get all this gear, people come to me all the time. Well, I've been doing this a while. I'm thinking of buying new stuff. I'm like, well, what are you trying to do? What's the point? What are you trying to achieve? A lot of time it's like, no, they don't need that. They just need a better room or just better technique. So, yeah, that's it. Communicate and know what they want.
George, great advice, and we have used up every spare second that Suncast will give us. So we're going to have to go. If people want to reach you, they can. You've got a podcast or two or a website. Where should they go?
Yeah, GeorgeThe.Tech is my consulting page. VOBS.TV, that's Voiceover Body Shop.tv is my weekly talk show about voiceover. And the Pro Audio Suite is where we take really deep dives into audio production. There's four of us that co-host that show in Australia and Chicago. And we really get to geek out over there at the Pro Audio Suite. So that's where you can find me around the web, and just all the socials. Everything is at GeorgeThe.Tech. That's all the socials.
GeorgeThe.Tech. We'll put those links in the show notes. And George, we got to go right now. Thanks so much for joining us. And let's not make it 7 more years before we talk again. Okay.
I'm happy to join you anytime. See you at NEB.
Okay. Yes, I will. See you in Las Vegas. Thanks a lot to Suncast, our producer, for producing today's show, to Andrew Zarian, the owner of the GFQ guys from Queens Network. Really appreciate both of you. And we're going to see you again next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.